To the sound of jets taking off and landing. The area's tightly packed houses come into distant view for British Airways Flight 38. The autopilot is in control as the crew lines up with runway 27 left. As it nears the ground, the plane is buffeted by some high winds.
Just a little turbulence.
It's the first wrinkle in an otherwise smooth journey.
It's not me, that's the auto throttles doing their thing.
We were picking up wind gusts of about 20 to 30 knots, and we were fully aware that the auto throttles would be able to cope with that, so they'd be moving up and down quite a lot.
You might want to keep the autopilot on a little longer than usual, to let the wind come down.
Will do.
In turbulent weather, the autopilot can make faster adjustments to keep a plane level than the pilots. 1,200 feet above ground.
I'll have to turn that off for now, sir.
Sure.
Thank you.
2 minutes before landing, Coward takes over flying the plane.
You have control?
Just as the two pilots had planned.
I have control.
I had a few seconds to spare before clearance to landing, and I was just tidying up my map charts.
Speedbird 38, prepare to land 27 left.
Cleared to land 27 left, Speedbird 38.
I remember looking out to see if our gate was available.
500 feet. 500 feet.
Stable?
Well, sort of.
Suddenly, there's a problem.
Pete, I can't get power on the engines. It's not giving me power. What's going on?
What do you mean?
I was looking at the engine instruments, and they didn't make sense to me because we were asking for full power, but the engine instruments were not giving us any power at all.
What's going on? What?
Flight 38 is crippled in the worst way imaginable.
Well, it looks like we have double engine failure.
With neither engine providing enough power, the jet won't make it to the airport. With 152 people on board, Flight 38 is falling toward London with only seconds until it hits the ground.
This can't be happening. This is one of the most modern jets in the world.
In the cabin, there's no indication that anything's gone wrong.
On approach to land, everybody seemed relaxed in the cabin. We were just looking forward to landing.
Airspeed low. Airspeed low.
Airspeed low.
And now I was looking at our impact point. I could see a set of buildings around the Hatton Cross area and a petrol station. I just knew if we were hitting those, then it was certain 100% fatalities. At that point, I felt the weight of my 4 bars on my shoulder. I am the captain. If I don't do anything, then everybody will die.
This close to the ground, Burkill doesn't have many options. He could take back control of the plane from Coward, but doesn't think that's the right move.
First decision really was to not take control. I remember looking over at John. He was still flying the plane well. Good, he's doing a good job. He's doing what I need him to do.
Burkill knows that even if they manage to clear Hounslow, the jet could still smash into the busy A30 motorway or the antennas at the edge of the airport.
I thought about raising the gear. That's the biggest drag on a commercial jet. But I needed the gear to crash on. We were going to impact, and that was going to take the brunt of the impact, so I had to leave the gear down.
With a crash imminent, Burkill has only one move left, but it comes with enormous risk.
I knew I had about 15 seconds to make a huge decision. I needed to get past those buildings. It was obvious to me that I needed to raise the flaps.
Retracting the flaps will reduce drag, but also lift. The plane will fly further but drop faster. Burkill must determine which is more important.
I wanted to discuss it with the crew, but this was all in a matter of seconds. I remember holding that lever for a fraction of a second.
He hopes this move will help his plane avoid catastrophe.
The effect was immediate.
Now Burkill makes the announcement every pilot dreads.
Mayday! Mayday! Speedbird! Speedbird!
It was hard, very hard. I remember the couple of impacts and the noise.
Good God!
The landing was hard. Just a huge bang. The noise, bits falling off the ceiling.
Then I also became a passenger because we were now in an uncontrolled aeroplane. We were sliding along the ground and I didn't know what we were going to hit next. And then I thought about my wife and kids and I said goodbye to them.
The lights went out.
I could hear the wreckage breaking up. And then we stopped. When we actually stopped, I was surprised that I was still there. And then I looked around the flight deck and I was more surprised to see that all three of us were unscarred.
Everybody stay seated with your seatbelts fastened!
And I quickly became the captain again.
The crew switches off the fuel,
APU fire switch.
hydraulic and electrical systems.
Control switches. Come. Checklist complete.
I then had to look after my survivors. I thought 20% were dead because this aircraft was broken up.
This is an emergency. Evacuate! Evacuate!
The air stewardess then took control completely. As she opened the door, I smelt the fuel.
We should hurry.
And realized that we need to get off this aircraft.
The big danger now is fire. Having survived the landing, passengers could be killed if flames sweep through the jet.
Jump! Jump!
I left all my luggage and just got myself down the slide.
Jump!
Let's get out of here.
I went through the galley and checked the right-hand aisle, and I was surprised to see nobody there.
Despite Burkill's fears, there are no casualties. Outside in the cool January air, the scale of the disaster is clear.
The right wheel had actually been ripped off during the impact. The engines were just sad. They were all ripped apart. The cowlings were ripped off and the engines were half buried. It wasn't an aircraft anymore.
I now start to realize that we'd been involved in a major accident. I saw the damage to the undercarriage and to the wing.
The plane narrowly missed the A-30 and the antennas at the foot of the runway.
It could have been total devastation. If the impact had been on anything other than soft mud and grass, the likelihood of a fire was immense.
Given the amount of damage, it's incredible that only 47 people were injured.
I felt quite lucky that I was still alive. It was quite a surreal feeling.
From China, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown praises Burkill and the crew.
I think it's right to pay tribute to the calmness and professionalism of the British Airways staff, the captain, Peter Burkill, for what he achieved in engineering a landing that protected lives.
Investigators have some early hunches about what caused the engines to fail. They also have plenty of clues. But a key piece of evidence is already missing.
I dreamt of his world. The world that used to be. Before the Votans arrived.
Australia's grand bowler in a world like no other. Defiance, stream now on 7+. They don't just watch the action.
Heathrow's emergency planning swung into action.
The crash of British Airways Flight 38 dominates the news. It's the most serious accident at Heathrow in 30 years.
Heathrow Airport is a very busy airport. It is the main airport in the UK, so anything that happens in Heathrow Airport immediately hits the media.
More significantly, the 777 is one of the world's most modern and reliable jets. The accident unsettles the airline industry.
The 777 is as safe as an airplane can be. It had such a superb safety record. What on earth happened? You don't like not knowing whether it might happen to the rest of your fleet.
Investigators quickly arrive on the scene. Phil Slight is the lead engineer for Britain's AAIB, the Air Accidents Investigation Branch.
When you first approach an accident site like this, the first thought you've got is, where do I start? The plane landed about 1,000 feet short of the runway. The landing gears pushed up through the wings. The nose landing gear collapsed.
Just hours after the crash, investigators interview the crew. Captain Peter Burkill has a first-hand account of what happened.
I think I wanted to talk about it because I knew of the innocence of the whole crew.
This isn't our fault. We didn't do anything wrong. But the engines weren't giving us any more power.
Well, it looks like we have double engine failure.
We tried to give them more power manually, but there was nothing.
Burkill explains that something had caused both of the jet's Rolls-Royce engines to roll back at the same time, robbing the aircraft of power.
Acceleration on both.
When you hear something of a double engine failure, you start looking at what's common. What could cause both engines to fail at the same time? So our first thoughts were that it may have run out of fuel.
A fuel shortage is rare, but it has happened before. In 1983, a Boeing 767 ran out of fuel flying over central Canada. A mistake in converting between metric and imperial measurements left the plane with much less fuel than the crew thought. At 26,000 feet, they lost power to both engines. The captain was able to glide the plane to a safe landing at an abandoned airbase. In the case of Flight 38, this theory is immediately questioned.
Jet fuel has a certain odor. Anyone who has worked with an aircraft will know the distinctive smell of Jet A1 fuel. There was certainly a lot of fuel leaking from the aircraft, from the ruptures to the bottom of the engines when we arrived on site.
A check of the plane's dipsticks confirms 2 of the tanks did in fact have fuel.
So we knew that there was plenty of fuel on board this aircraft to complete the flight.
There remain several other possible explanations for such a loss of power, and investigators must tackle them all. There is great confidence that the mystery can be solved, as any and every piece of evidence investigators could ever want is readily available. They have access to the pilot, the crew, and most importantly, the entire plane.
We were quite fortunate to have the amount of data that we had on this aircraft. Because the aircraft remained intact, we were able to interrogate lots of computers and also get lots of data from the recorders. Additionally, we had data external to the aircraft, such as radar data, and also the radio transmissions as well.
Mark Ford retrieves the plane's flight data recorders, which promise to give investigators important clues. He has another resource, the QAR, or Quick Access Recorder. While the black boxes are in the rear of the plane, the QAR is a data recorder in the front, used mainly for diagnostics.
It does have an advantage over the flight recorder, though, in that it has a greater memory capacity and can record additional parameters over and above those available on the flight recorder. You can recover the data from a quick access recorder within a matter of minutes in some cases.
Speed, altitude, control settings, cockpit conversations. In all, the various recorders have preserved 1,400 different pieces of data, which should help the investigators close the case. But when they study the QAR, what they find is chilling.
The quick access recorder data stopped about 45 seconds prior to the accident itself. Initial thoughts were that there was an electrical problem, possibly that had affected not only the QAR, but possibly the engines as well.
The 777 is one of the latest advances to computer-assisted airplanes. Pilots don't directly control the plane. Instead, their inputs are sent to a computer. Those signals are then relayed to the engines, flaps, and other systems on the aircraft.
Pete, I can't get power on the engines.
A massive failure of the plane's information systems could explain why the engine stopped working. Perhaps the computers that control them froze. Farnborough is home to the AAIB. The flight data recorder has been sent here for analysis. An electrical problem would be recorded on this device. But interpreting the information will take some time. Time investigators don't have. There are hundreds of 777s landing every day. They need to find answers before whatever brought down Flight 38 strikes again. While they wait, authorities turn their attention to the fuel recovered from the ruined plane. A bad batch of fuel could have deprived the aircraft of power just when it needed it most.
Well, fuel can be contaminated in many different ways. It can be particle contamination, it can be biological contamination, and they can get into filters to restrict the flow.
We took several samples from various points within the fuel system, so not only from the fuel tank itself, but also from remnants within fuel lines and also within various fuel components.
We managed to trace the fuel back through the documentation to a shipment of Jet A1, which came from South Korea. And that was shipped across in a tanker to China and was then transported by pipeline to Beijing Airport. We compared it with over 1,200 other batches of fuel in the UK, and it came out to be very good.
Investigators next consider the possibility of a blockage in the fuel tanks. They discover some bizarre evidence. Several small pieces of tape are recovered, along with something else.
When we were in the fuel tanks, we did find a few small articles. One of them was a red scraper.
The items were likely left over from when the plane was built 7 years ago. But while they're peculiar, there's no indication that any of them played a role in bringing down the plane.
Obviously, it's not ideal to find anything within a fuel tank. We obviously looked to see whether this would have had an effect on the fuel flow to the engines. The items were so small, they would not have caused a restriction.
As the search for answers continues, a puzzling find surfaces. Less than 3 years before the Heathrow crash, another 777 suffered a serious mid-air problem. After taking off in Perth, Australia, a Malaysian passenger jet was climbing through 38,000 feet when suddenly the plane's autopilot pitched the nose up and climbed steeply. Calamity was only averted when the pilot took manual control of the jet.
They did manage to get it safely back to base. The investigators established that this was a computer problem.
British aviation authorities consider that the electronic brain of one of the world's most reliable jets might be faulty.
The Malaysian Airlines aircraft was really quite an unnerving one. The investigators sort of pulled out the files on it and started looking over it to try and get some clues.
Did we have a problem with the electronic control system, causing the engines to roll back?
If flaws are found with Flight 38's computers, it means 777s around the world could all be disasters in the making. This thought hangs heavily over the industry. When the readout of the plane's flight data recorder is conducted in Farnborough, investigators learn that the crash could have been much worse.
There was very little they could actually have done.
It looks like we have double engine failure.
There was only 30 seconds between when they were fully aware of what was going on.
Airspeed low.
And the accident was inevitable.
Records show that soon after the engines failed, the plane started falling faster than 1,800 feet a minute, a very steep descent. But lack of power was only one factor working against the crew. They had extended their flaps on descent. It helps control the plane at lower speeds by increasing lift, but the extended flaps create drag, which slows the plane down. It takes more power to keep the plane flying with a wider wing.
Airspeed low.
I needed to raise the flaps. I knew that by raising it 1 notch to flap 25 would be the right thing to do. To reduce the drag, that's what I had to do.
And what he did here gave them a few extra feet.
Had the flaps been left at flaps 30, the aircraft would have struck the ground just before a set of ILS antennas.
The plane then would have slammed into the antennas, sustaining even more damage and increasing the chances of serious injuries. For their efforts, Burkill and his team are considered heroes.
Flying is about teamwork, and we had an outstanding team.
There is no doubt. Without the flight crew's actions, Flight 38's landing would have been a catastrophe.
Now, the recordings
As they continue examining data from the flight data recorders,
continue right until the moment of impact.
investigators are no closer to solving the case.
Analysis of the flight recorder didn't identify any particular fault with the aircraft electrical system that would have resulted in both engines rolling back.
They are at least able to determine why no data was found on the quick access recorder for the last 45 seconds of the flight. It's not an electrical fault as they first feared.
The 45-second delay in the QAR recording was a result of the fact that the QAR doesn't record in real time. It buffers the data and then will record approximately 45 seconds later.
With all the information from the plane's various data recorders now collected, investigators have a precise picture of what happened. The jet was on the proper course as it made its approach to land when things went horribly wrong.
At 720 feet, the right engine rolled back. 7 seconds later, the left engine rolled back. The autothrottle attempted to command greater thrust.
It's not me, that's the autothrottle.
But the engines didn't respond.
I can't get power on the engines.
While electrical and computer problems are ruled out as causes of the crash, the flight data recorders do point investigators to the likely source of the problem.
The two most significant parameters from the quick access recorder were the fuel metering valves. Both those valves indicated that they had opened to their fully open position.
The plane's computers were calling for as much fuel from the tanks as possible. The valves were fully open, but not nearly enough fuel was reaching the engines. A plane with plenty of fuel and a working computer system still crash-landed, and investigators can't determine why. They focus on the weather on the day of the accident.
It was a very cold air mass over Siberia, so we were aware of the cold conditions, but the flight was expected to be smooth and also quick.
The plane's path took them high over Russia. The outside temperature went as low as -74 degrees centigrade. It's a potentially dangerous temperature if not monitored closely.
In cold air masses, you have to be very aware of the fuel temperatures.
When fuel starts to freeze, it produces wax. As the fuel temperature drops, the wax becomes greater within the fuel itself until it comes to a point where it can no longer flow.
We have a fuel temperature gauge on the flight deck, which is monitored at all times, and I personally look at that every time I do a fuel check, which minimum is once an hour. Basically, you don't want to get it below -34 degrees centigrade.
While they were cold, the temperatures never dipped into the danger zone where the fuel could wax and clog the system. And the fuel temperature increased significantly as the jet approached London.
We were coming through 20,000 feet, and I remember seeing -20 degrees centigrade, so it had already started to warm up.
Another potential cause of the crash is ruled out. Investigators are now running out of possible explanations.
And the expectation from the media and also from aviation experts was that we would have the answer within days.
But there was no comment today about the ongoing investigation.
It very quickly became apparent that that would not be the case.
They had the pilots, they had the passengers, they had the aircraft, they had everything there. except the thing that caused it. That had disappeared, as if by magic.
Bingo car insurance keeps premiums low, but...
Despite mountains of data and physical evidence at their disposal, investigators are still unable to say what caused the crash of a British Airways 777 at Heathrow Airport. They turn to a failure of the fuel delivery system as a culprit. To prove it was responsible, they need to pinpoint anything out of the ordinary about Flight 38's journey on January the 17th, 2008.
It's a daily flight operating from Beijing to Heathrow. We wanted to work out what was unique about this flight. Why this flight in particular?
If you've got a very puzzling incident, like the 777 accident at Heathrow, you're going to mine all the data you can.
I'll just put them over there for now.
So we approached many operators to obtain some data of previous flights so that we could then do a comparison.
Flight data is collected from companies around the world.
And we had something like 144,000 flights in all.
But it will take months of work to analyze this enormous volume of information. To study Flight 38's fuel system more closely, huge sections of it are brought to the AAIB hangar and reassembled.
It allowed us to basically just sit there and look at it and to brainstorm and come up with ideas as to what might have caused it.
McDermid and his team consider all possibilities, from design flaws to a malfunction specific to this aircraft. The examination comes up empty.
We carried out an exhaustive and very thorough inspection and testing of the fuel system, and we find nothing wrong.
Frustrated, investigators are at a dead end.
We kept going through this cycle. We kept going back over what we'd done before. Had we missed something? And every time we went back over, we kept coming back to no.
There was no trouble with the plane's computers. It had plenty of fuel. And no problems with the fuel itself. But somehow, when it was most vital,
Mayday!
The engines didn't get the fuel they needed. The AAIB detectives have run out of suspects.
There was no clear explanation. Nothing that you'd seen before.
It's not giving me power.
In any airplane, let alone the 777, could have explained this.
Now they turn away from the clues they have to those they don't.
Phil started coming out of a mantra, which was a quote from Sherlock Holmes.
Whatever is left, however improbable, must be the cause.
Has to be.
In this case, we always kept coming back to what's there, what could have been there that's not there now. And we come back to ice.
Suspicion that the cause of the accident was ice grew stronger and stronger.
But investigators are faced with a nearly impossible task. How can they prove that ice had brought down the plane when the evidence they need would have melted by the time they arrived? 3 months after the crash, Brian McDermid flies to Seattle to work with engineers at Boeing, the company that built the 777. If ice brought down Flight 38, they need to prove how and why.
We took the pipes from the right side of the fuel system, and those pipes and those couplings were used on the test rig at Boeing.
Ice in the fuel lines has long been a concern for jets of all kinds. But decades ago, engineers found an ingenious way to deal with the ice forming in the fuel of passenger jets. The heart of the system is the fuel oil heat exchanger, or FOHE. Cold fuel runs through thin tubes, which are surrounded by the hot oil used to lubricate the engines.
The purpose of a fuel heater is to heat the fuel up to prevent icing of the delicate fuel control system.
The FOHE is designed to prevent exactly the problem investigators suspect crippled Flight 38. but it's also a potential bottleneck in the system.
During the fuel testing, we were looking to establish where we could get a restriction that would restrict the fuel flow to 6,000 pounds per hour. And the only place that we could get such a restriction occurring was on the face of the fuel or heat exchanger.
Investigators have to prove 3 things. First, that substantial amounts of ice can accumulate inside the fuel pipes. Second, that the ice can suddenly be released. And finally, prove that it can block a device specifically designed to melt it.
We use different methods of controlling the environment around the pipes that range from dry ice to cold fuel and to hot air to simulate the environment around the pipes that the aircraft experienced during the flight.
After each fuel cooling test, investigators look inside the pipes for ice. But they can never get much ice to form, let alone block the fuel lines.
And the fuel temperature was minus 30 degrees centigrade. Very little ice would stick to the inside of the fuel pipes.
Investigators know the temperature on the accident flight didn't get much colder. So how had the ice formed?
We still hadn't answered the question of where does the ice come from in the first place? And indeed, was it ice? Or was there something else that we've missed?
Surprisingly, when the fuel temperatures are warmer, the breakthrough arrives.
If you have water in the fuel, then that water will freeze and form ice crystals. And then when the temperature gets to about minus 20 degrees centigrade, then those ice crystals will start to stick together and will also stick to the inside of the pipes.
Below minus 20, any ice crystals in the fuel are too cold to attach to the pipes. But in the sticky range, between minus 20 and minus 8 centigrade, slushy ice forms and sticks to the sides of the fuel pipes.
So when we demonstrated that ice could actually build up and grow onto the walls of the fuel pipes, there was a certain amount of surprise as to how much could actually grow.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Well, the question for us at this stage was, how could that ice come off the pipes?
Investigators think they have the smoking gun. But they still can't prove how a small bit of ice could bring down a $200 million plane. They continue analyzing thousands of comparative flights to see what made Flight 38 unique.
From 35,000 Rolls-Royce powered flights, it was less than 1% that had the same features as the accident flight.
After 7 months, they still can't.
Hey, AI, what can I claim at tax time?
Why not everything?
Wherever you hear a tax time tip, check it's legit. Go to the source of tax info at ato.gov.au or talk to a registered tax agent, authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
With network monitoring, Telstra Internet helps protect you from suspicious activity. Visit Telstra today.
How good's me time? Do moments to yourself exist as a mum, do they?
Bedtime is my me time.
I have a hiding spot when I lock my bathroom. Can't even go to the toilet in peace. I'll let you know if it ever happens.
How good's that? Big W.
What I'm about to tell you is top secret. There's a powerful group of people out there that are secretly running the world. I'm talking about the guys no one knows about, the top 1%, the guys that are invisible, that play God without permission. And now I think they're following me. Please tell me you're seeing this too.
We do not compromise. We are relentless.
Mr. Robot. Stream now on 7+.
Watch out! Whoa! And buckle up for some massive truck stoppers.
Whoa. Good luck, mate.
Fire, flood, and mud. It's all here.
It's Outback Trucking, how I like it.
So get in gear for Outback Truckers Channel. Stream now on 7+.
Crack the case. On November the 26th, 2008, more than 10 months after the crash, the importance of finding an answer is underscored when the elusive culprit strikes again. Another 777 runs into trouble 39,000 feet above the United States, when one of its engines simply stops working.
Fortunately, in that case, the engine recovered and the aircraft landed safely at Atlanta.
Even though it didn't result in an accident, It reinforces concerns that there's a potentially dangerous flaw on every 777 around the world. The incident captures the attention of the British Airways crash investigators.
The Delta Shanghai flight really was investigated with huge interest. The engines were Rolls-Royce engines of the same type. So they immediately went looking for evidence of the same problem.
And in fact, they do find important similarities between the Delta airliner and British Airways Flight 38.
The aircraft had operated a long sector from Shanghai in China to Atlanta. The fuel temperatures were within the sticky range that we had defined during the research. We were able to see that the reaction of the engine was very similar to that of the 777 at Heathrow.
Later examination of the Delta flight shows no evidence of any electronic, mechanical, or fuel system problems, strongly suggesting that the culprit was indeed ice.
When we heard about the Delta flight, we were more convinced than ever that we were on the right track.
McDermott and the investigators at Boeing in Seattle continue their testing. It's been a year since the accident, and the problem hasn't been found or fixed. They've run hundreds of simulations and spent millions of dollars. They still can't get the ice in the fuel lines to clog the fuel oil heat exchanger and cause the kind of blockage that brought down Flight 38.
We came to a stage where we had not actually come up with what had caused this accident. At this time, the media and also the general public, there was a bit of unrest as to why we had not yet come up with an answer.
Industry pressure to resolve this case is intensifying. Investigators still need to know what made Flight 38 different from thousands of others that had flown under similar conditions. To find out, they retrace every moment of Flight 38's journey. The voyage from Beijing involved a gradual climb, a steady cruise, and a gradual descent. The fuel temperatures fell and rose accordingly, causing ice to accumulate in the fuel lines. That ice posed no danger unless it was released. Now investigators study the fuel flow and find that it was kept steady for most of the flight. The autopilot maintained constant speed and low power for hours, never demanding an abrupt increase in engine power until just before they reached the runway.
The approach into Heathrow was quite a turbulent approach, and the engines were demanding various levels of thrust power.
It's not me, that's the auto throttles doing their thing.
And there were 4 changes in fuel flow, one of which was a very high fuel flow of around about 12,000 to 13,000 pounds per hour demanded.
A closer review of the American Delta flight reveals that its engine rolled back under the same circumstances, a sudden demand for power after a long period of consistent speed. Investigators are now set to duplicate these precise conditions. They hope that by reproducing the moments just before landing, which was the only part of the flight where the crew suddenly required more power, they may finally get the answer they're looking for.
The problem that we were looking at is very, very difficult to replicate. And during what was one of the last tests, we actually managed to get all the elements together.
After simulating running engines at constant speed, investigators increased the power.
We allowed the ice to accumulate for 3 hours, and then the flow rate was increased.
What happens next breaks the case wide open.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Brace for impact!
Investigators' sudden demand for more engine power causes the fuel pressure downstream of the fuel oil heat exchanger to drop dramatically. And when investigators examine this vital component,
we then saw that ice had formed across the face of it.
soft ice that had formed deep inside the fuel lines broke free when the pressure was abruptly increased. It restricted the flow of fuel to the engines. investigators have finally found the Achilles heel hidden deep inside the 777. The tubes that bring the fuel through the FOHE jut out just above the container of hot oil. It's just a few millimeters, but was enough to prevent the ice from coming in contact with the hot surface below and melting.
Now, the ice doesn't totally restrict the fuel flowing through it. It has some porosity, so the fuel will continue to flow through. But the flow rate is much lower than it should be.
In all of the tests, only one gave investigators the result they were looking for, the one that exactly matched the journey of Flight 38. While the plane flew over Russia, water in the fuel turned to ice. At -20, it began to build up along the inside of the pipes. The steady speed of the aircraft ensured this accumulation was never interrupted. Then, as the plane approached Heathrow, turbulence resulted in the first demand for power since much earlier in the flight, and things cascaded into a serious problem.
Doing their thing. You may want to keep the autopilot on a little longer than usual.
The gushing fuel washed the ice through the fuel system until it built up against the face of the FOHE, with disastrous results.
Pete, I can't get power on the engines. It's not giving me power.
Facing a threat no one knew existed,
Mayday! Speedbird!
the pilots didn't have a chance to solve the problem. But why had the American Delta crew been able to clear the blockage, while the British Airways flight ended in near catastrophe? It's discovered that after just a few seconds of reducing engine power to idle, the blockage in the FOHE clears. But this maneuver was not available to the British Airways pilots because they were so close to the ground. Soon after the Seattle tests, Rolls-Royce redesigned the fuel oil heat exchanger.
So what Rolls-Royce did was to actually remove those protruding tubes, so you now have a flush face.
And they found that if they flattened this surface, even if ice crystals did form in the fuel, they'd go straight down the holes in the block. Very, very easy fix.
Other aircraft manufacturers are ordered to ensure that their systems aren't vulnerable to the same problem. Peter Burkill, John Coward, and the rest of the crew of Flight 38 received the British Airways Safety Medal for their performance during the accident. It's the company's highest honor.
Crew have been presented with an unprecedented failure, and they did the best they could in the time that they had available.
The crew did as good a job as they could, and since they really only had about 30 seconds to think about what they were going to do about this, they couldn't have done any better than they did.
The ice that brought down one of the world's most sophisticated airplanes was gone by the time investigators showed up.
Weird thing about this investigation was that the culprit had fled the scene.
The inquiry into what happened consumed thousands of hours of manpower and cost millions of dollars.
These people really pulled out the stops to find out. And the reason? We have to know.
With unrelenting diligence and a little inspiration from Sherlock Holmes, the mystery was finally solved.
Whatever is left, however improbable, must be the cause.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain. I hope you had a good...
Captain Stefan Rasmussen has been in love with flying all of his life. After learning to fly in the Air Force, Rasmussen joined Scandinavian Airlines. On December the 27th, 1991, he's in command of a state-of-the-art DC-9. The flight will take him to the very edge of his abilities, as his engines fail and his plane falls out of the sky.
Stockholm, Scandinavian 751, we are crashing into the ground now.
What caused the most baffling accident in Sweden's history is nothing investigators could have imagined. What they finally uncover will strain Rasmussen's lifelong relationship with airplanes to the breaking point. It's 2 days after Christmas. Stockholm Arlanda Airport is a mess of snow, slush, and ice. Passengers boarding a mid-morning Scandinavian Airlines flight to Copenhagen are finding the cabin very uncomfortable.
It was really warm inside the plane when we entered because there had been like heaters on during night. And I saw when the passengers embarked, they also wanted to take off like jackets and shoes, and because it was like a sauna.
Is it possible to turn the heat down now?
"34-year-old Ulf Sedermark has been with the airline for 4 years. He's the first officer on today's flight.
It was a light snowfall. Temperature was just below freezing and light winds. We were going to fly Stockholm to Copenhagen and then to Warsaw, back to Copenhagen and down to Barcelona that day. It would be quite a long working day.
Stefan Rasmussen has just finished an exterior check of the plane. The Danish pilot is in command this morning.
In those over 12, almost 13,000 hours I've been sitting in an aircraft, I always felt that I put the aircraft and back on like a rucksack. And when we took lift on the wings, we melted together.
The plane Rasmussen is strapping on today is a nearly new DC-9, easily identifiable by its 2 rear engines.
By now, everyone should know that door stays open.
Right.
Even in the days before terrorist threats, flying with the cockpit door open is unusual. It's just one way Rasmussen has endeared himself to the crews and passengers he flies with.
I always had my cabin door open because I found out that if we had the door open and they could see that there were a human being in there, they'd trust you.
For me, it felt good that the door was open. It just feels like you have a connection more than if the door is closed.
The winter weather has delayed this flight, but Rasmussen won't compromise safety for schedule.
Where are we now with the de-icing?
The wings aren't quite done. They've done the underside. Now they're doing the top.
Thank you.
Under Captain Rasmussen's instructions, the ground crew had already de-iced the plane once. Now they're giving it another pass.
And it took a while, but they had trouble getting rid of the snow on top of the wing. So we were slightly late for our pushback out to our runway.
For Captain Per Holmberg, this kind of delay is routine business. He flies DC-9s for the airline. A passenger this morning, he is scheduled to command another flight later that day.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain. I hope you had a good Christmas. We're just getting our wings cleared as we've had a bit of snow overnight. And when that's finished, we're ready for takeoff for some warmer weather. I handpicked the airline's best cabin crew to take care of you today. We all hope you have a nice flight.
Finally, Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 is cleared to proceed. There are build-ups of snow that the crew must avoid on the way to the runway.
Would have been nice of them to clear the snow.
Oh, that would have made it too easy. Approaching holding point, runway 08.
Roger, Scandinavian 751. You are cleared for takeoff from runway 08.
Spoilers?
Armed.
Auto brake, takeoff and armed. Runway update performed. Checklist completed.
Set power.
Despite the winter conditions, the takeoff is routine.
V1, rotate.
Gear up.
Gear up selected.
When Wolfie reached out for the gear, I heard things which was different.
Just 25 seconds into the flight, as the plane is climbing, there is a problem.
When you hear things that are different from the normally, you get suspicious. There was a really big roar in the aircraft, almost like an explosion. Boom.
There was another banging noise that I just thought, what is that? I had never heard that before.
It's obvious the source of the noise is the right engine.
It sounds serious. I believe it's a compressor stall.
I took the right throttle and moved a little back, but there it really became strange because the engine performance increased when I reduced the throttle. It's like if you're sitting in your car and you're turning your wheel to the left and the car is driving to the right, you get confused.
We're not supposed to like call into cockpit now. And then I thought, this is an emergency, I have to call the captain.
But Captain Rasmussen doesn't respond to the call. He's too busy trying to figure out what's going wrong with his plane.
I couldn't see anything on the instrument. They were quite stable and a quite normal range, no problem. But I could hear those roaring every second.
He searches for telltale signs of attack or structural failure.
And I looked up at the cabin pressure, because if you have a bomb or a freight door or anything which is ripped off, that'll give a decompression.
In the cabin, pressure levels are stable. But the crew has other concerns.
I saw the smoke and it smelled burnt.
What should we do about this?
Just 3,200 feet above the ground, the emergency escalates. The right engine quits.
When we have flown a little over 1 minute, the right engine just went down. I had a very, very short moment of thinking that I was in a nightmare and just dreaming. I was confused. I was really confused.
2 seconds later, the left engine also quits. The plane is now powerless.
One engine dropped and then another engine dropped. I thought that it wasn't true. It wasn't true. It wasn't real.
Less than a minute and a half after takeoff, the DC-9 begins falling from the sky.
And after that, it was complete silence. And I think that was the worst moment for me. Just being in the air, and it's so quiet. It was like a bird just sailing through the sky. So then I started to get scared.
Engine relay.
As the pilots try to restart their engines, things get even worse. The left engine erupts in flames.
I saw the exhaust gas temperature was rising rapidly. The max temperature was around 680 degrees Celsius, and I saw it go above 800.
A fire in the engine could spread to the rest of the plane.
Should I pull?
If Sedermark pulls the fire extinguisher in the left engine, he will never be able to restart it. He pulls the handle to put out the fire. From his seat, Captain Per Holmberg can see that the crew is in trouble. Flight 751 is now falling at a rate of 1,200 feet per minute. But air traffic controllers at the Stockholm airport have no idea the plane is in trouble.
Arlanda, Stockholm, Scandinavian 751.
Good morning, SK-751. Climb to flight level 180. We have problems with our engines, please.
We need to go back to Arlanda.
751, roger. Turn right, heading to here.
Suddenly, the radio goes dead. A result of the failed engines. Only the right engine can provide power, but it's now spinning too slowly to generate electricity for the instruments.
Without the engine, you don't have any propulsion, so the only energy you have is your height.
With time running out, the pilots of Flight 751 must find a way to restart the right engine, or else crash into the countryside below.
Live.
Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 is now falling from the sky at 20 feet per second.
How can I help?
Captain Per Holmberg, who boarded the flight as a passenger, becomes part of the flight crew.
Like he came out in the cockpit and he said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" I don't think I even said yes. I just said, "Start the APU."
If the auxiliary power unit can be launched, it will bring back the radio and instruments.
So I just handed him the emergency checklist and started focus on controlling the flight to see that we were maintaining the speed and the attitude and that we were wings level. He managed to start the auxiliary power unit, so my flight instruments were supplied from that.
But for some reason, Captain Rasmussen's instruments don't come back online.
He managed to fly the plane basically by feel.
Power is also restored to the cabin, but it's small comfort to passengers who now know they're in extreme danger. Stockholm Air Traffic Control instructs the pilots to return to the airport.
Scandinavian 751, are you able to turn right, heading 090, radar vectoring for 0-1?
But the plane is now just 1,600 feet from the ground. And First Officer Sedermark's attempts to resuscitate it aren't working.
Roger, we are maintaining our heading, but we are trying to restart our engines.
Making a 180-degree turn back to Stockholm could be catastrophic.
I really had the feeling that if I turned the aircraft at that time, we would have stalled.
When you're turning back, you are losing a lot of energy. So the most safe thing to do is actually just to go straight, keep your wings level. That means that you will use less energy of your altitude, so you can maintain your speed.
You can maintain 2,000 feet.
We are not able to maintain 2,000 feet. We are descending. We are at 1,600 feet and descending.
Holmberg wants Rasmussen to focus his attention on finding a landing spot.
Look straight ahead. Look straight ahead.
He was screaming at Stefan, just look straight ahead and watch the flight path.
Prepare for on-ground emergency. On-ground emergency!
Bend down! Bend down! Bend down!
So we shouted bend down, I don't know how many times. Bend down, bend down, bend down.
Keep your seatbelts fastened.
While passengers brace, Rasmussen considers where to land his plane.
Look straight ahead.
And I had an idea that on the northern direction could bring us out to the Baltic Sea, which was at that time frozen. And that's an excellent runway.
But instead, he finds himself gliding powerlessly over a dense forest.
I saw that green area and I saw that little light spot in the middle of the forest, but that really looked short.
Steer right, steer right.
Just 500 feet above the ground, Captain Rasmussen lifts the plane's nose to slow it down. hoping to soften the crash landing.
Pine trees from the top there look very soft. I could use the trees as almost like a pillow.
Should I lower the landing gear?
Yes, gear down.
Bend down and hold your knees.
I prepared myself for a hard impact. If it's an emergency landing, we have no engines, I just thought this is going to be a hard landing.
Stockholm, Scandinavian 751, we are crashing into the ground now.
I wasn't afraid until we were flying into the trees. Then I was scared, and I knew we were not going to make it.
I didn't thought I should die. I knew I should die. I made my prayer to God. And then, a moment after, we were in a strange world.
After we have come to a complete stop, I feel the smell of airplane fuel. I thought, okay, we're gonna explode. And I look around and I see the snow because there was a big crack in the airplane fuselage just in front of the aft galley. And you could just walk down on the ground.
Everything was quiet, and I woke up. It might only have been a split second or so.
I was afraid that my spine was broken, that I wouldn't be able to walk again. So I remember I was sitting there and I was moving my toes and my feet just to see if I could have control over them. I had a pain in my hand because I had broken a bone in my hand, and I was bleeding heavily from my forehead, so I was trying to get clear of all the blood that was coming down in my eyes. And Stefan told me that we had to get out of the aircraft.
After plowing through 125 meters of pine forest, the pilot's fear is now that the broken aircraft could catch fire. Dozens of passengers escape through the breaks in the fuselage walls. But Captain Per Holmberg has been knocked unconscious by the crash.
It all went so fast that no one could take in what happened. So I tried to stay with the group of passengers I had there. But I just knew the feeling also that we had to wait a long time for the rescue teams.
Help will be here soon.
Fortunately, no fire materializes. But because they removed their winter clothing while boarding the sweltering plane, many passengers are starting to freeze.
Most people were just standing in their shirts, t-shirts, very, very little clothes. Few didn't even have shoes on.
They are now at risk from hypothermia.
So I focused on being caring. Maybe I did it for my own sake also. I needed a hug also. It was comforting to comfort someone else.
The wreckage of Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 lies just 15 kilometers northeast of Stockholm Arlanda Airport. The fuselage has broken into 3 pieces. In the chaos of the moment, nobody knows how many people have been killed in the crash. Rescuers arrive within minutes and attend to the freezing survivors. They pull Captain Per Holmberg from the cabin, unconscious.
He landed on the wall at impact, and he skidded down on the wall to the floor at impact. So he was quite badly damaged. He cut his eyelid, and he also got his collarbone that was broken off, so his shoulder was in front of him.
92 of the passengers have sustained injuries. Only 8 are considered serious. But when the crew conducts a head count, they're stunned to learn that out of the 129 people who boarded Flight 751, Not a single one was killed in the crash.
Everyone survived. It was like a shock just to take in. Wow, that was a fantastic comment.
This was the happiest captain in the world. We were all alive. That was a great moment.
Reporters break the remarkable story to the world. As the Swedish Accident Investigation Board, or SAIB, takes charge of the case. Scandinavian Airlines alerts its own investigators, dispatching Tori Hultgren to head up its team.
It's most unusual that the plane crashes in a wooded area and everybody survives. I've never heard of it before. The police kept everybody off the site itself. There was a cordon around the aircraft about 100 meters. We had a complete aircraft, nothing had burnt, and we had lots of good data.
Henrik Ullander from the SAIB gets to work on the evidence.
And we all started to plan the documentation of the accident site, which means photographing all the fine little approach through the wood, you know, and to take photos of all the parts that were spread all over the place.
The two black boxes, which record cockpit conversations and store flight data, are recovered immediately. Investigators speak to survivors. Everyone tells a similar story.
Would you mind telling me what you saw and heard?
Loud, booming sounds from the engines moments after the flight began. Smoke in the cabin. And finally, the entire loss of power and an engine on fire.
You have a twin-engine aircraft, and you are really not supposed to lose both engines at the same time.
The Pratt & Whitney turbofan engines are sent to a Scandinavian Airlines repair shop for closer examination. Investigators are eager to speak with Captain Rasmussen about the incident. But to their dismay, Scandinavian Airlines takes him to the media first.
The first question, what did you think when both engines refused to function? It'll take me an awful long time to tell you all that.
The normal case is that the key witnesses, like the crew and so on, should be kept in quarantine until they meet the investigation board.
European media celebrate Captain Stefan Rasmussen as a hero for landing the DC-9 without engine power. But investigators consider the possibility that he or his co-pilot had made errors that caused the crisis in the first place.
The honor and the glory always rests with the captain, but so does also the mishaps.
I knew that being a person where in the spotlight of the press would be a quite different situation. And I said to myself, the only thing you can do now is to give them all their story and then pray that they will find the reason.
Lars Lindberg is an investigative representative for the Swedish Airlines Pilot Association. He examines the wreckage for signs of mechanical or structural failure.
We knew both engines had failed for some reason, so we was concerned what was the background for something like that to happen. The first time I saw the engines in the workshop, I was surprised.
Is this all they found?
There was a number of parts that were completely missing, and this was something we hadn't seen before to this extent.
To find out what happened, investigators must find the missing pieces, which now lie somewhere in snow-covered fields and forests.
I dreamt of his world.
A close study of Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751's engines reveals exactly which pieces are missing.
Part of this aircraft was shedding parts from both engines. And then what you do is you go further in and you document everything and you try to find the root cause and see how it all comes together.
The missing pieces could hold the key to discovering why both of the plane's engines quit within seconds of each other. But they could be anywhere along the 15-kilometer route the aircraft covered during its short flight. They must be found. Investigators use the flight data recorder to map the plane's journey and determine where engine parts may have fallen. After scouring the snow-covered fields along the plane's path, the recovery team finds 500 fragments. Just a fraction of what's missing. Many are very badly damaged. Some of the titanium blades actually seem to have been on fire.
You had this titanium fire inside both engines, both the right and the left engine. And this titanium fire is a very unique occurrence. It's requiring very, very high pressure and very high temperature for a titanium blade to catch fire.
Investigators dig deeper into the cause of the engine trouble. The left engine's fuel line is badly dented. It was obviously hit by a fast-moving piece of metal inside the engine. The impact caused it to rupture.
This part got dislodged, it went out and hit a fuel line, and that fuel line cracked, sprayed fuel onto the hot engine.
The engine was clearly coming apart during the flight.
That sounds serious.
The discovery explains the fire in the left engine and why so many pieces of it were found so far from the crash site. But investigators are left wondering why the engines broke up in the first place. A major clue comes from passenger and crew testimonies, which told of repeated booming noises before the left engine caught fire. The cockpit voice recorder picked up these sounds.
So you can hear that, and we could correlate that with when the damage occurred. You can see that on the flight data recorder.
The sounds are familiar to investigators and leave no doubt. The DC-9's engines began surging shortly after takeoff. Jet engines rely on a steady stream of air for combustion. A series of fans move incoming air through various stages of compression. But when that flow is disrupted, fuel at the rear of the engines ignites violently and shoots forward.
That's a surge. You can have a small surge and you can have a large surge. And you can have the complete surge on the whole engine.
Sounds serious.
This surge process was very violent, so after a very short time, we had an aircraft with two engines that could not be restarted, that didn't generate any thrust. Basically, you had a giant glider at that point.
A closer look at the fan blades from the front of the engines explains why they were surging. They're badly dented. The damage would have prevented them from effectively directing air to the rear of the engines.
This damage that twisted the fan blade started this process. You got this disturbed air in the fan, you got this rotating fan stall that then triggered this whole breakdown, the compressor surge, and then the whole process that led up to the dual engine failures.
But what exactly mangled the blades? There are ways to tell.
If it comes from a stone, rubber, ice, and so on, you can see it on the shape of the damage. The ice causes very specific damages. It's sort of like a soft dent.
Analysis of dent patterns on the fan blades is conclusive. They were struck by ice. Now investigators want to find out where the ice could have come from.
Weather data for the 24 hours leading up to the crash.
They know Stockholm had been hit with rain and snow in the hours before Flight 751 took off.
It was a situation with the temperature around 0 degrees. It was a drizzle, snow, rain in the morning.
They learned that the DC-9 arrived from Zurich the night before, with the fuel tanks more than half full.
They had quite a large amount of reserve fuel, of diversion fuel, in their wings. The fuel in the wing tanks were close to minus 20 degrees Celsius.
The conditions that night were ideal for the formation of clear ice on the wing surface.
And here you had very, very cold fuel on the top wing skin. And as the temperature dropped during the night, it went to snow and rain, and finally snow. So there was a layer cake. Ice at the bottom, slush, and snow on top. About 10 inches total on top of the wings in the morning.
Responsibility for de-icing the plane ultimately falls on the captain. Rasmussen insists he was aware of the overnight buildup. Investigators wonder if the pilot did all he could to ensure his plane was completely free of ice. Rasmussen claims he instructed technicians to de-ice the plane thoroughly.
I didn't walk around with the aircraft. It was cold. It was frosty.
Noticing that there was still frost on the wings, the head technician ordered a second round of de-icing.
I was really convinced that the aircraft was clean. And so was he. So was he.
Where are we now with the de-icing? The wings aren't quite done. They've done the underside.
The cockpit voice recorder backs up Rasmussen's testimony.
They've got it good and clean under the wings? Yes, yes.
They de-iced the aircraft once and looked at it and I said, once more. And they de-iced us the second time.
In fact, a total of 850 liters of fluid was sprayed on the aircraft. But the fluid may have been faulty, not potent enough to melt the thick layer of ice that had accumulated on the wings overnight. Technicians test samples of the fluid used to de-ice Flight 751.
We found no discrepancies. There was nothing wrong with any of the fluids used.
But when investigators interview the maintenance crew that worked on the plane, they begin wondering if the de-icing team was thorough enough in their efforts. The ground crew insists that after they sprayed the wing, it appeared to be clean. But that appearance was deceptive.
It looked perfect, because the clear ice on top of the fuel tanks, you cannot see the clear ice.
A technician inspected the front of the wing and found no ice. He couldn't have known that there was ice further back, out of his reach.
No provisions for stairs or anything that he could use to get up on the wing at the de-icing platform. It looked shiny and nice, couldn't see any ice on it, but still there was maybe an inch of ice on top of the wing when the aircraft took off.
As soon as the plane took flight, the ice became a problem.
On this aircraft, the engines are positioned behind the wings, and as the aircraft rotated and the wings bent in order to take the weight of the aircraft, this ice in the wing roots loosened, and it sucked right into the engine.
The ice damaged the fan blades at the front of the engines and ultimately caused them to begin surging.
Nobody really expected that this would happen, or could happen, but it did.
When ice breaks off the wings during flight, it doesn't pose a problem for most aircraft. But the placement of a DC-9's engines leaves them more susceptible to being struck. The Pratt & Whitney engines on Flight 751 were designed to withstand this type of ice ingestion. Something else must explain the disaster. Investigators know that the wrong reaction by a pilot can make surges worse. They comb through the flight data to see what these pilots did when the emergency struck.
The first thing you do when you have a surge, if you recognize it as a surge, is that you reduce power.
Captain Rasmussen claims he did just that.
Of course, you just pull the throttle back, and then you have the balance between the incoming fuel and incoming air. And that was actually what I did.
But the flight data recorder tells a different story.
Why is the engine power increasing?
It clearly shows that in the moments after the surge, thrust was reduced, but then seconds later was increased to beyond full power.
Yeah, it didn't add up because the RPM was increasing to 110%, and the throttle position was moving. It shouldn't be. The only thing that could move the throttles in clamp was the pilot's hand.
But if Rasmussen didn't push the throttles forward, something else did. It would explain the captain's confusion as his engines began to surge.
As a pilot, when you've gone through the training, you've done all your emergency training, you've been through the simulator, and now you have a system that's doing something that you don't expect, it's very confusing.
Despite their relentless efforts, investigators can find no possible explanation for the increase in thrust.
The frustrating part with the investigation was that we could not figure out why the system did what it did.
Then, almost 2 months after the accident, the plane's manufacturer provides the answer. The culprit is something called automatic thrust restoration.
It's brand new. It automatically increases the thrust during the climb.
Swedish authorities learned that automatic thrust restoration, or ATR, was recently introduced as a safety feature on Scandinavian Airlines planes. It existed because the FAA had discovered some pilots were throttling back considerably while taking off and landing to reduce noise over residential neighborhoods. The ATR was designed to make it impossible for them to throttle back to dangerous levels.
So as soon as he powered back, the system kicked in.
Investigators learned that when Rasmussen reduced power to clear his engine surge, the system read this as a dangerously low power setting and pushed the throttles forward. The increased thrust made the surging worse until the engines destroyed themselves. The investigation concludes that the pilots had taken the right steps to clear the surge and prevent the catastrophe. But the computer code which governs the ATR undermined their efforts.
A strip of zeros and ones caused the throttles to move and caused the engines that were stalling because they already got too much fuel, got even more fuel. And they went into self-destruct, both engines. In a few seconds, they were both totally destroyed.
The system was so new to Scandinavian Airlines that nobody there had even heard of it.
And it was confusing for everyone because we didn't know about the system, we didn't have information on the system. SAS didn't know the system existed on their aircraft.
We hadn't bought that modification. And it was sneaked in via another system.
Because he didn't know about the ATR, Rasmussen was unaware that he could only save his plane by switching it off. News that the automatic thrust restoration was responsible for the accident proved both a blessing and a curse for Captain Rasmussen. It eliminated any notion that he had made a mistake.
When I got that message, I was really released. It was like winning in the lottery. It was, because I was so happy. Because then I could explain why I was in that total cone of confusion.
But the fallout would ultimately destroy a love affair and end a career.
Ladies and gentlemen.
On October the 20th, 1993, the Swedish Accident Investigation Board releases its report on the crash of Flight 751. It determines that the actions of Captain Rasmussen and First Officer Sedermark contributed to the safe outcome of this incident. And although investigators question Captain Per Holmberg's decision to enter the cockpit in the first place, they do praise his contribution.
This crew flew until they stood still on the ground. They never gave up. They never gave up. They didn't give an inch.
The investigators put much of the blame for the accident on Scandinavian Airlines because their procedures for checking for clear ice were inadequate.
It's a compressor stall.
The report also condemns the fact that the pilots didn't know about the automatic thrust restoration and how it would act in a surge situation.
If the ATR system hadn't been there, if the trolleys hadn't moved forward, there wouldn't have been an accident.
It was a bit strange that we didn't have all the documentation available to us, so we knew what we could expect if something like this would happen.
In the wake of the crash, Scandinavian Airlines started training its pilots how to use the ATR system. They also implemented steps to ensure airplanes don't take off with clear ice on the wings.
We changed all the procedures, we provided stairs for the mechanic, and we made it a requirement to go up on top of the wing and touch it with your hand to verify after de-icing.
After healing from his injuries, First Officer Ulf Sedermark returned to the cockpit.
I didn't feel the responsibility that I wouldn't be able to do my job again. Whatever happens, I know that I still can see things for what they are. And I still love doing my job, and if something bad happens, I can deal with it.
But Stefan Rasmussen's return proved far more difficult.
Set power.
After I'd heard from a high-skilled psychologist, we talked about getting in the air again. He knew that would be a hard decision to take.
Gear up. Fire drill.
After time in the simulator, Rasmussen couldn't regain confidence in his plane.
Sorry, guys.
In a disaster situation, in a crisis, is that you have optimized the teamwork between man and machine. I really felt that I didn't trust the aircraft.
Pilots tend to take the responsibility for all that went wrong. Too much of the glory and also too much of the responsibility.
With the right counseling, about 90% of pilots involved in an accident are able to continue flying. Even though Captain Rasmussen received treatment, his career ended with the crash of Flight 751.
Taking that decision to leave aviation as pilot was like having your highest love and come to that conclusion that you have to kill her. I had many hours, many missions of happiness in an aircraft. And I loved my passengers, I loved my aircraft so much, so I said, that's it. I never regretted, never. And I think I was right.
Flight begins and ends here. A strip of asphalt scorched by jet engines and marred with rubber. But not all runways are created equal. One of the world's most notorious is runway 35L at Congonhas Airport in Brazil.
It could surprise you at any moment.
In July 2007, TAM Airlines Flight 3054 becomes its latest victim.
Accelerate. Accelerate.
It can. It can.
The runway claims 199 lives. It would be carefully scrutinized, its history reviewed. Investigators desperately need to know why runway 35L is so dangerous
35L.
before more lives are lost.
Mayday, mayday.
Heavy rains pound Brazil's largest city. Sao Paulo sees this kind of deluge regularly during the winter rains. The downpour snarls traffic to and from Congonhas Airport. 800 kilometers away, TAM Airlines Flight 3054 is en route from the southern Brazilian city of Porto Alegre. The Airbus A320 is headed for Sao Paulo 90 minutes away. For the 181 passengers on board, it's a routine domestic flight. But there's been an unexpected development for Captain Henrique Stefanini di Sacco. He and his first officer, Kleiber Lima, have just learned that the heavy rain has temporarily shut down runway 35L, the main runway at their destination.
Did they say when it would reopen?
No.
Let's prepare an alternate just in case. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like due to the weather, we may not be able to land at Congonhas as planned. I will keep you advised as I get more information.
Congonhas Airport is one of the busiest in the world. Planes take off and land here every 90 seconds, carrying a steady stream of people and cargo into the country's economic hub. But Congonhas is also notorious among pilots. The airport lies in the heart of the city, crowded on all sides by apartment buildings, offices, and roadways. Runway 35L is less than 2,000 meters long, short for large jets. Even worse, it's built on a hilltop with a sharp drop-off on all sides.
The risk the airport poses, due to its construction, due to its geography, it does not allow for simple mistakes.
Não permitiria erros simples, falhas simples.
Captain Carlos Camacho is the flight safety director of the Brazilian Pilots Union.
Quando se aproxima da pista,
as you approach the runway, your adrenaline is really pumping. For us pilots, it's like landing on an aircraft carrier.
Nós enxergamos como porta-aviões.
It makes Congonhas one of the most treacherous airports in the world. In fact, a Pantanal Airlines commuter plane spun out of control while landing just the day before. And a few months ago, disaster was narrowly averted when a Boeing 737 came skidding to a stop, just inches before the steep embankment at the end of runway 35L.
When pilots begin landing at Congonhas, they're more worried than when operating at any other national airport.
Flight 3054 is at cruising altitude south of Sao Paulo when the crew gets news that runway 35L is back in operation.
3054, 35L is the active runway.
There's no need to divert.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I have some good news for you. The runway at Congonhas has reopened. We'll arrive as scheduled shortly before 7 p.m.
The relief of the passengers is not shared by the pilot. Stefanini has an additional challenge on this flight.
Remember, we only have one reverse, sir.
Yes. Only the left.
He will have to land at one of the world's most challenging airports, with less than the usual amount of stopping power. One of the Airbus's 2 thrust reversers isn't working. The devices are designed to slow the aircraft on landing by reversing engine thrust.
If I was the pilot that day, I would be extremely concerned knowing that one of my reversers wasn't functioning.
TAM 3054, 35L, clear to land.
Stefanini will be landing on the infamous runway 35L.
The runway is wet and it's slippery. The wind is 330 at 8 knots.
The crew was informed of poor braking conditions on the runway.
The
Airbus is on final approach. Even though the autopilot could get the plane to the runway, the captain decides to take over the controls himself.
Land green, manual flight.
He wants to bring the plane in as close to the runway threshold as possible. He needs every inch of runway he can get.
35L, 35L.
The concern was that after touching down, the pilots needed to be sure that they would be able to stop their plane before the end of the runway.
The passengers only know that they'll soon be landing. Now they are only 300 feet above the city. The Airbus is lined up with the center of the runway.
Middle. The one-way conditions.
200, 200. 100, 100.
1 dot now. Okay.
The plane's wheels will touch the Congonhas tarmac in seconds.
20. Retard.
As the plane touches down, their worries about landing are only just beginning.
Captain Stefanini applies reverse thrust to the A320's only working reverser.
The pilot would have to activate the reverser on the engine that had a working reverser as fast as possible to initiate deceleration.
But the plane is not slowing down.
Reverse number 1 only.
At this rate, it will use up the entire 1,945 meters of runway in less than 30 seconds.
Decelerate. It can!
The pilots operated the foot brakes with the pedals, pressing on them for a long time.
Look at this.
Now,
Look at this.
the aircraft mysteriously pulls to the left. It's almost as if it has a mind of its own.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
I dreamt of his world. The world that used